those solutions that have been defined by these working groups and community and bringing them to life. And that is, at the end of the day, some of the most important part, right? There's been many plans developed for different sectors in New Orleans. The question is, can we take it and can we bring it to life? And then finally, when we finish this process, we'll get to phase 3, which is about implementation and monitoring. So there'll be 4 meetings. This is the first one. Then there'll be 3 more that'll happen once every month in our group implementation tables. And we'll end in July with a final meeting where we'll look across all of the strategies and be ready to press go on the youth master plan. So what is our purpose, right? Our purpose here is to move from a list of community-informed solutions to a clear set of coordinated actions. And to do this, we're going to need to move from understanding current progress and barriers for each solution. We're going to need to identify some priorities, right? We know this is a 10-year plan, so we can't just do everything all at once. So we're going to need to prioritize and say which of these solutions benefit from our coordinated action. And then we'll say, what are the action steps tied to each of those top solutions? Who's going to do them? And how do we know if it's successful? We don't have to do all of that today, but that's what's going to be the next 4 meetings culminating in July with a clear plan and a clear set of next steps. So what's going to happen today? Well, hopefully you'll build some connections with other folks on your tables. You'll start thinking through a systems change mindset. We'll familiarize ourselves with the solutions that have been prepared by the community and working tables, and we'll look at momentum and barriers across those solutions. And that's going to set us up for session 2, where we hope to see all of you again to identify these shared barriers across solutions, think about really moving those barriers aside, start prioritizing, and start looking at information we need from across different tables, right? Karen mentioned the importance of silo busting. Phase 1 was all about silo busting. There was working groups divided by age group instead of sector. And now we have identified, look, we're going to need to get some experts around the table to focus on learning, to focus on safety and justice. But that doesn't mean we want to pause or diminish the amount of cross connections. So there'll be points throughout this process for us to ask and receive information and actions from other tables. So who's going to be helping out with this process? Well, each table is blessed with 2 great table leads. Those will be the facilitators and will help move the work in between sessions. You'll have a tool facilitator who will help capture things in the meeting and send out emails of next steps. And then we have most people on this call, right? Table members. And what we're really asking for table members is that you just bring your whole self to these meetings, right? You contribute your expertise. You may have some in-between work, which we'll talk about in a second, and really leverage your colleagues and community, right? Each of us come to these convenings speaking not only for ourselves, but for the places and organizations and communities that we come from. And we may ask you to reach back out to someone in your organization or in your network, just to make sure that this is an inclusive and equitable process. And finally, CYPB and TrepWise and the partner organizations will be providing support throughout this process. So I know what you guys are thinking. In between session work, we're going to assign you homework, hopefully not too much homework. But what we know is that we can't get through everything necessary sometimes in these sessions. So there may be specific next steps and information we need to gather in between these monthly meetings, which will be named in an email for you. And we do ask that if you do sign up or you're asked to do a next step, you just keep everyone in the loop, including your tool facilitators and table leads. And that's how we'll have not 40 hours of meetings, but rather really structured, focused monthly meetings, as long as we're moving in between those. These are our community agreements for how we're going to be together. We know everyone can't be articulate all the time. We also know that there's not a lot of time. So just making sure we're moving through the process. Speak your truth. If it's not said, it won't be known, right? And that's connected to another conversation here, which is about difficult conversations, right? We do want to create spaces to really look at these systems and the ways that they're succeeding for our young people, but also the ways that they're not. So create space for those difficult conversations and don't shy away from them. We're going to have feedback from youth and other experts. Expect that, right? We'll be going to that youth council and asking them, what do you think about this? You may get some feedback that'll help guide and focus your group. And finally, nested in one of these is the 9 guiding principles that Karen walked through before. Okay, so that's a little bit of the process. And what I want to do now is talk a little bit about systems change. Before we do that, I know systems change means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I would love if a few people in the chat, just like when you hear the word systems change, what do you think? What's either a definition or what does it bring up for you? I'm trying to get better at long pauses. Okay, great. So we got get to the root, heart, not superficial. Transforming systems, broken systems need to be repaired. Holistic transformation, addressing the illness, not the symptoms. Exactly. And that's exactly rethinking the way we communicate. All right, keep them coming. Transforming the structures and institutions that enact our systems. That's exactly right. And when we think about systems change and when we think about this process, we know that if we're only going to work at that symptom level, we're not going to get the type of transformational change that the Youth Master Plan has identified that it's striving towards. So we're going to use a particular framework for this session and moving through, which is called the water of systems change. But the water of systems change is just a way of thinking about the things that you all have already stated in the chat, right? So I like their definition a lot, though maybe not as good as some of the ones we just heard, which is systems change is about shifting the conditions that are holding the problem in place. And when we think about shifting the conditions that hold the problem in place, they've defined 3 levels that might happen at. They talk about the structural level, our policies, our practices, our resource flows and funding. They talk about relational levels, the relationships, the power dynamics, the interplay between the people who connect and create a system. And then finally, I saw a good comment in the chat, which was like changing the way we communicate, changing the way we think, right? That's really that transformative level at the bottom. Those are those mental models, those beliefs, those assumptions that influence, often unconsciously, the way that we think, act, and ultimately build our systems. And oftentimes, when we work to change policies, when we work to change systems, it's very familiar for many of our nonprofit folks, or at least our policymakers, to start at the top, right? That's what we're familiar with. There's a set of laws, there's a set of policies, and we need to change those. And that's true, right? And one example they like to use, this is developed by FSG, and as they talk about this framework, is the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. And that's an example of a type of systems change, right? It was engaging with the healthcare system that really started at that structural level. 1,000 pages of policy about how the structures of our healthcare system needed to change. It went a little bit into the relational level, changing the dynamics of people with pre-existing conditions, changing a power differential. But at the end of the day, at least the critique from SFG, is that it didn't transform truly how we think about healthcare, right? At our core levels and our relationships to who deserves and who needs to have healthcare, there wasn't really work done at that transformative level. An analogous example, but maybe one that worked at a different pathway, is the movement for Black Lives, right? And the recent movements around defunding the police. Whether you agree or disagree with those movements, they started in many cases at a mental model level, changing the way people think about law enforcement, changing the way people think about how Black and brown bodies are viewed in the system, and then worked upwards and ultimately ended up fighting for structural change. And this is not to say one of these things was good and one of these things was bad, but rather to say we need to work at all of these levels, right? And if we're going to change the systems for young people, we need to identify the ways that each of these levels are working or are not working within our systems. So we've created a little visual here of 2 different types of environments, right? And we can see the current negative outcomes. And this is not to say every single outcome in our systems in our city is negative, but when we looked at a lot of the data, we saw the ways in which the outcomes in many ways were failing young people. And that is not just a set of disparate outcomes. That's actually funneled from these different levels below, right? From negative policies and practices, from negative relationships, from negative mental models. But we can move in a different direction. And we know we want to move from the clouds to the sun, right? To those positive outcomes. But to do so, we'll need to shift our policies, we'll need to shift our relationships, and we'll need to shift our mental models. And everything else will then, on the visible level, will change. Or that's the idea. So 2 more thoughts, and then we'll get to specifically our breakout. Well, then I'll ask Karen to maybe give us any final thoughts on systems change, and then I'll move to our activity, which is that, why are we doing this, right? It sounds like a lot of work. It sounds like potentially very academic. Well, we're doing this to understand leverage points, right? So Donella Meadows, who's a famous systems thinker, says, we map our systems to understand leverage points, where a small shift in one thing can produce big changes in everything. So the reason we're going to go through this process of naming specific barriers to solutions and doing action strategies is we can't do everything at once. But if we can identify things that are holding the problem in place and move those barriers out of the way, maybe everything else will flow. Right? And that's why we're going to go through this process with a bit of a new mindset. So the last visual I'll leave you with is about our process and how we're going to do this. So we're going to be in our breakout groups. And what we know is that we've been blessed by these working groups and by the community with a set of solutions that operate at different levels. Some of those solutions are just at the structural and policy level. Some of them are about relationships. Some of them are about changing hearts and minds and how people think about young people. And what we know is we want to go from our current state, which is articulated by the issue statement, to our desired state, which is articulated by the Y&P goals. And the way that we're going to get there is through implementing these solutions. But if it was easy to implement the solutions that we came up with, they already would have been implemented, right? There are some very new ideas, but many of them are ideas that have been around for a long time. So in order for us to get from our current to our future, we're going to need to identify the barriers at each level that are stopping us from progressing. And you can see those barriers and even some more reactionary barriers happening as we go through this process of change. But ultimately, we want to end up, here we have like a youth-centered iceberg, right? We see the young people at the top of the iceberg and the barriers are gone. And that's the vision that we're working towards. So Karen, do you want to add anything as we talk about systems change and how you think about it in this process?
I would just say that we've got to begin to look at how we can work differently in a together space so that the leveraging actually occurs. It is not our expectation that there'll be no challenge to structure or relational works in our end example, but it is every idea that if we really affect the way we work, that we can address those as they show up in ways that are about the end run and not just the reaction to the current state. And so for our purposes, we're looking to sort of change the way we work in ways that allow us to look longer rather than just instant, because instant costs a lot more. And we really need to look at the investment we're really willing to leverage and make on the hands of the success for our youth. And that is what we're trying to do here in the process. So with that, I think we're ready to go forward.
Awesome. Thank you. Great. So I'm the only thing that is standing between you and your breakout rooms. I'm going to quickly talk to you guys a little bit. If you have questions, actually feel free to pop them in the chat and we can respond to them in real time. But I'm going to quickly walk you guys through today's activities. Okay, so the first step is going to be moving into Zoom rooms. Palmer, do you want to talk about Zoom rooms? Do you want to do that at the end?
Sure. Yeah, just a brief note on that. So you all received a calendar invite and an email yesterday that included your specific Zoom room for the second part of this meeting. If for some reason you are unable to find that link either in your calendar or your email, just stay in the room. I'll be here and I'll help you navigate. If you didn't receive anything, same thing, and we'll just figure out what room you need to go in. But don't fret if you can't find it. I'll be here.
Awesome. So what are you going to do in these rooms? Well, you're going to introduce yourselves. You're going to have a moment to review your solutions and your context. We're hoping that everyone had a chance to review them beforehand. So in that case, you'll spend your 5 minutes refreshing yourself. If you haven't gotten a chance, in your area, you'll be able to look through, well, what are the solutions and what is some of the context and how those were created? And then you're really going to move into an activity, which is about filling out what we're calling solution briefs. Okay, so here's an example, HWB1, it's about long-term services for new and young parents, about these home visitation programs. So you'd say like, okay, who's working on this, right? Who's currently working on home visitation programs, parent support groups, and long-term services? Where's the momentum? And what are some of the barriers right now to this work moving faster or more successfully? And if you can, in this worksheet, we are going to ask to sort of name what level we think those barriers are operating at. If not, that's okay, but it seems like one of the barriers here is about the way that these things are funded, right? This is about a funding stream, so that's really a structural barrier. Or maybe this is about the relationship between different sectors of the healthcare system and the nonprofit system not communicating, that would be relational, right? Or maybe this is about how people think about young parents. That's a mental model barrier. We just want to get some stuff down. And then if you can, what's the big next step to advance the solution? This could be procedural. I think we need a map of all of these providers, or this could be someone speaking with deep expertise, the big next step, right? And the expectation is not that you know all this information. So you may say, I don't know the big next step. And then you'd put down in your follow-up plan for that solution, we need to follow up with this person to get a big next step and understand where the momentum is. The goal of this is not to spend the whole time focused on one worksheet, but rather to get through as many of the solutions as possible so we can figure out who's working on it so that next time we have all this information and can use it to prioritize our solutions. Are there any questions? I'm going to throw it to Emily right before we go to the breakouts to do a last comment. But before we go, are there any questions or comments before we break? Awesome. Throwing it over to you, Emily, and then everyone will head to our breakouts.
Yeah, thank you, Isaac. My name's Emily Wolf, for those of you who I haven't met. There's Director of the Mayor's Office of Youth and Families. I just wanted to jump in and really just take a second to thank all of you. Building on what Karen shared at the beginning, this has been a process that has engaged youth input. That has been at the heart of it, but you all are really critical players in this next stage, which is moving us into action, as Karen said. And I think that, the timing around this couldn't be more appropriate, obviously, in terms of where we are in our country, around both racial equity, around moving through this pandemic. And so I just really, really want to, one, thank you all, to make sure that you know that we see you and we see you as critical players in moving this work forward, and encourage you to really stick with us through this. We've given it a lot of thought. Trepwise and Karen's team with the Children and Youth Planning Board have just done an incredible job thinking through how to structure this in order to get the most bang for our buck. We know your time is valuable. And I just wanted to share, on behalf of the mayor and this office, that we just really are grateful for your participation.
Awesome. So at this point, we will now leave this Zoom room. And especially if you're those tool facilitators, you can go and set up your other Zoom rooms. For all the participants here, I would look in your email or look on your calendar. You'll have an invite to a specific Zoom room that'll say health and well-being or space and place or youth voice. And that's going to be the smaller group that you're going to be working with today and throughout the rest of the process. We can hang around here on this Zoom if anyone is having real troubles finding it. So if you're really confused, stick around here and we'll get you where you need to go. But otherwise, we ask that you leave this Zoom room and go hop into your breakout rooms.
Hi, this is Danielle. I didn't get an invite.
Same here. This is Lisa Maria.
This is Paulette. Same here.
Did you all
Sorry,
have?
with the start.
All right, I'm going to take you one by one. This is Karen. So which of the breakouts were you looking to get to? Which one which of the categories is of interest to you, and we can get you to the right room?
Maybe we can write it in the chat if we know, since there's
That would be
several of
great.
us. And
That would be great, and then I will respond to with the right. Here's the thing: it's you'll be signing up to be in that category at that table for the series. So make sure you're clear that it's not a one-time only. It's just for the series, okay? And I will match you up to the right room.
I'm dropping them in the chat. So I just put in youth voice and then I'll put in the other ones as well.
Thank you, Palma.
No problem. Youth voice, health and well-being, safety and justice.
I see someone put in the chat that they'd like to work with Geraldine Turner Warren, and she is in the health and well-being table. So that's the link to click.
All right, and I think that should be everybody's that I put in there. Is there anyone else who is here that hasn't gotten the link that they need?
Yes, I have not gotten. Would you mind telling me a little bit about health and well-being? And I'm kind of between that and then the justice table.
Yeah, I can actually screen share the solutions for you. So you can just take a brief look at them, which is like the main work of these sessions is going to be prioritizing these solutions and then figuring out action strategies to bring them to life. So for health and well-being, that looks like this.
Okay, so those 5 are the ones for the wellness,
And then what was the other one you wanted to look at?
the justice.
Great. So that would be these 5.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So there are a few more folks still with us. Are there other pieces of information you need so that you can get to the right group? How can we help you?
I can go to the justice room, the safety and justice breakout. Thank you very much for that. It was very helpful.
Yeah, no problem. That's in, I'll put it in the chat again. There you go.
Thank you again.
All right. Karen and Maggie, I think maybe we hop on over to our respective rooms.
Right. I'm concerned that there's still a couple people still with us. Okay.
Geraldine, you'll be in health and well-being, right?
Yes.
Yes. I'm gonna pop it in the chat so it's fresh.
Okay. I'm hopeful. I see maybe one other person still with us.
Yeah, looks like Jody Dyer.
Jody, did you need a link to one of the action tables? And if so, did you have a thought as to which one? Jody, are you there? You have stepped away.
I'm happy to stay on this or hop out, or we could just end the session and
I think we need to end it and. And that
Okay,
will
well,
do it.
Palmer, don't end it yet because I want to save the chat.
Okay. Do you want me to make you host again?
Yes, please.
All right, so I'm gonna head out. Thank y'all.
Cool. Okay. Mm.
All right. See you later.
Okay. See you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.